Welcome to Big Ten Day Today. Glad to have you with us in our Chicago studios. Mike Hall and Anthony Herron. I am in what has often become your chair now.
Is my name on the back of it?
I thought it was weird.
Yeah.
You have a permanent marker, too. Put it on
Right.
tape or something, you can pull it off.
I mean, I'm not going to say if I did it or not, but I may have done it.
But it does match your handwriting perfectly.
Oh, it's odd.
We were having you sing before the show began, and you said
Some walk by night. Why are you doing this? Because you know I can't resist.
I mean,
I don't know how moonlighting came up, but for some reason it did.
I just threw the softball in the air. You took a swing.
Moonlighting. What? We're going to have to pay for this if I keep singing it, though.
Yeah, I think that's our boss on line one.
That's going to come out of your bank account.
How do we move on to our big story today? Right off the bat, we have a football expert in Anthony Herron with us, so we might as well focus on this coming weekend. There are spring games and spring practices left and right in the Big Ten. All of these squads are having either an official spring game or a spring practice. So we're going to talk with Brett Bielema coming up a little bit later on, and kind of the nature of spring games has really evolved. I mean, I remember when we launched as a network, there is a game. You are having team versus team, and there is a scoreboard, and a lot of places still do that, but a lot of places have made it more just kind of a way to get through the event without getting injured. How has it changed to you?
It's definitely evolved in that way. I was just talking to PJ Fleck about that this morning on Big Ten Radio, just that, you know, for even as a head coach in the years that he's been in the Twin Cities, yes, there was one approach initially when he took the program over, but then it's evolved over time. Of course, at my alma mater, Kirk Ferentz has been there. So for me, spring football under Kirk Ferentz was one thing in Iowa City in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. That has evolved over time because there's a couple of different factors. One, of course, the most recent and the biggest one is the transfer portal, the way that rosters tend to evolve even just throughout the months of the offseason. But then also it's not quite as necessary. You are in shape and you are on the grind pretty much year-round throughout college football. So it's not as necessary to get those additional physical reps in just to have everyone ready. A lot of college teams have now gone to more of a pro approach just to make sure that you have sort of off-season OTA minicamp sort of style as opposed to feeling like you got to get padded up and bang around the whole time.
Well, you brought up the transfer portal, and that's where I want to go with this segment is I want to look at the teams that are having spring games, and you give us an idea on who's someone we should keep an eye on for each of those teams. And it feels weird. I mean, personally, as a fan of college football, like I'm starting to prep and I'm going, wait, who's on this team?
Yeah.
Because it's a constant feeling of free agency, and someone was here, but then they're not here, and then they agreed, and then they backed out, and so it's a little tough to get a grasp on someone who's an important name. Let me start with the Indiana Hoosiers.
Okay.
They have a brand new head coach. They also have a brand new quarterback that just transferred in.
I believe they should be legitimately excited about Curtis Rourke coming in because he's got a great resume. He was the MAC Player of the Year a few years ago at Ohio. Had a nice season this past year as well, but got a little bit banged up. This is, to me, one of the things that should be remembered about the transfer portal, where he's a player who came out of Canada. He's got bloodlines where his brother is a high-level quarterback as well, playing professional football. But he's been at the sort of mid-major, group of five sort of level. Now this is an opportunity for Curtis Rourke at the Power 5 level in the Big Ten Conference to measure himself against the very best in the sport. He's a big guy with a live arm, and Curt Cignetti has had success on offense and specifically with the quarterback position at every other stop he's been at. So while, yes, it's a loss for Ohio, but it is a gain for the Indiana Hoosiers because he is legitimately talented. I expect big numbers from Rourke this season.
Speaking of big numbers, he's tall, 6'5".
True.
For a QB, which is good. And I liked when I talked to...
Great analysis from you, by the way.
Well, it's just looking at a number.
Okay, I mean, it's fair. Yeah.
But I talked with Cignetti back on signing day, and he said, he reminds me of is Phillip Rivers.
Oh, okay.
Now, as we'll talk, Cignetti is an interesting character, and he's certainly prone to say interesting things, so maybe that's unfair. But he coached Phillip Rivers, so he's got a little idea of what he's talking about.
He does, and that pedigree, just knowing how to develop signal callers. I was able to talk to Curt Cignetti on this show earlier in the week, and one thing he pointed out was that he tries to match his system, his scheme, to the style of the QB himself. And in the case of Curtis Rourke, it may not be where it's just, a five-step drop every time trying to heave the ball deep down the field, but leaning into the nuance of how he's able to throw the football and getting accustomed to that in the spring. One good thing is even though it's not the most physical form of practice, Curt Cignetti tends to take an approach where this spring they've had 13 out of the 15 practices. They'll be we'll be able to check them out tonight on the Big Ten Network. And so utilizing that amount of practices, less time on the field individually each time out, It's not the most physical. The line of scrimmage isn't banging consistently, but you can still get a lot out of the skill work. The quarterbacks throwing to the receivers, the running backs working on their steps and timing out of the backfield. So we should get to see, we won't see the final version of Curtis Rourke as he takes the field with the Hoosiers in the spring, but we'll see some gains. Kurt Cincinnati has already seen gains in that quarterback, and he hasn't named him as the starter, but he was willing to say on this network earlier in the week to me that, yeah, there is a gap that's beginning to widen between Rourke and Taven Jackson at the moment.
I think when you turn to Illinois, there's a gap at the quarterback position there. Luke Altmaier is the guy. There doesn't seem to be much of a question. Your incoming transfer is a guy who can help in tight end Cole Rusk.
Really love the name. There's no doubt about that. The name is a very fun one. But aside from that, the game itself, another player stepping up to a higher level of the sport who's got some family lineage. His dad was also an athlete for the Illini. And so this is an opportunity that Cole Rusk has been waiting for a long time. And so now he's really excited about joining up with the Illini. Essentially, his dream program is the way that he's described it. But he's been an All-American before this, now getting a shot at the FBS level, at the Power 5 level, and being able to do so with a team that values the tight end position the way that Brett Bielema and the Illini do. And they'll need that. When you have continuity at quarterback and in Barry Lunny Jr.'s offense, we do know that they're losing tight end talent to the National Football League right now. So this is an opportunity, a slot at tight end with a pass-catching weapon that they're bringing in Cole Rusk, where now they'll have the potential to continue to have the development and the production at that spot.
Again, we're going to have Brett Bielema join us, the head coach of the Illini, in just a little bit. I'm going to ask him which position group is impressing him the most thus far this year. Those first two transfers were from smaller schools, Ohio and Murray State. Your next transfer is going to Michigan. Jayshawn Barham comes from Maryland. Right
there within the Big Ten Conference, the Wolverines have seen him and they've been impressed by him. He entered the portal, and certainly a big loss for Maryland is Jayshawn Barham because of the talents that he brings to the table. But Maryland's loss is the Wolverines' gain. And what I'm hoping for, just my observations in calling a bunch of Maryland games over the last couple of seasons that Jayshawn Barham has been there, Maryland used him as an off-ball, in-the-box linebacker. That's frankly where he prefers to play. But as they started to shift him around, get him out on the edge, start to utilize the pass rush skills that he brings to the table, I think in Michigan's very, sort of versatile defensive scheme that I anticipate we'll end up seeing them run this season, I do think that Jayshawn Barham as an outside linebacker, as a rush defender, playing the edge more consistently is where he's best suited. And especially when you project to the National Football League, then I do think that that's likely where Michigan, because of all the talent they've put in to the National Football League, and that there's no reason to think that won't continue to be the case, that they'll kind of project Jayshawn Barham in that role as well because he's an exceptional pass rusher. He's a great and a physical edge setter as a run defender also. So for him, as an every down guy, he's already played at a high level in the Big Ten. I think the Wolverines will utilize him well.
Yeah, two-time honorable mention All-Big Ten performer while he was a Terp. Let's stay in the state of Michigan now, go to Michigan State. All three of their quarterbacks last year popped into the portal.
Right.
So Michigan State is bringing on a guy who was with his head coach to be potentially their future quarterback right now.
I'm looking forward to calling this game on Saturday on the Big Ten Network because Aiden Childs is a quarterback that I've been watching since he was in high school. He played in the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio, so I got to witness him at that time when he was first committing to Jonathan Smith while he was still at Oregon State. Childs just spent this past season in Corvallis, so he'll show up. He has shown up in East Lansing already knowing the offense, already having some in-game action. And I got to tell you, because of the fact that he chose Oregon State over a variety of other programs, bigger names, bigger brands who were after him on the recruiting trail, because he was kind of a late riser like C.J. Stroud. Now, I'm not predicting that Aiden Childs is C.J. Stroud.
It sounds like you are. It sounds like you're saying
but that
Aiden Childs is the next C.J. Stroud.
Similar stature, and what impresses me as much as anything, similar mentality.
Yeah.
Because they were both late risers in recruiting. And, they're not these guys who were five-star out of the gate, who were the quarterback du jour as soon as they stepped onto the high school field. Aiden Childs dealt with injuries his junior season, missed a bunch of time then, and then just set the world ablaze as a senior. And so I'm really excited about seeing what Jonathan Smith's offense, having continuity in his system at quarterback, at center, at tight end. He brings a lot with him from Corvallis. And then just sort of the mentality, the aptitude that Aiden Childs will bring, his personality. He exudes a confidence, but a very approachable sort of confidence, kind of like yourself. So he's very approachable, very likable. People like to be around Aiden Childs.
Yeah. Just like me?
I wouldn't go that far.
All All right, we got halfway there. I do think it was interesting that Childs, it wasn't seconds after Smith left for Michigan State, but it wasn't long after that he transferred over and very quickly was like, I trust him. I remember we talked to him again on a signing day. He was like, I trust him. I want to be with him. He's my guy. That's really helpful for a brand new head coach, that the most important guy in terms of playing time on your roster is already on board with you hand in glove.
The physical attributes, the mental and emotional maturity of Aiden Childs. I'm really stoked for Michigan State fans to see what the quarterback position can become. Now, don't get any mistake, don't mistake it at all. Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren's offense, they're going to run the football. There's talent that returns back there. So it won't all be on the shoulders of Aiden Childs to make every throw and make every play. Some experience back on the offensive line as well. But when it's time to make a play, Aiden Childs can do it both with his arm, with his legs, and he's now in a position already where he can sort of help teach the offensive system to others around him. Even though inexperienced, he's still a very young football player.
Right, just a true freshman last year. Just time for one more. USC has a spring game. You got your eye on a safety, Kamari Ramsey, who transferred from across town.
I mean, they needed help. They needed personnel help. They needed the defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn, to come in, so they swiped him away from UCLA. And Kamari Ramsey just comes right over with him. A very talented, a big physical safety. And for all the gains that USC needs to make on defense, on the back end, there's a lot of talent that they've added there. And so for Lincoln Riley, we know he's going to figure things out on offense. Kamari Ramsey could be the main reason that USC's defense looks much improved over last season.
3 years of eligibility left for Ramsey as well. Much more coming up with Anthony throughout our show.